Okay, yesterday we started Pesukah de Zimra. The din like this, Mizma L'Saida, we say every day right after Baruch Shomar, is corresponding with the Korban Todah. The Korban Todah was a Thanksgiving offering that if a person, well today we bench Gomel, but in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, those people today that bench Gomel would have to bring what's called a Korban Todah. Now, Korban Todah, you say every day, it says in Halacha, you're supposed to say with joy, because with thanksgiving to Hashem for everything He does. And the custom is also that you stand by Mizma L'Saida. Okay? Now, Shabbos Yom Tov, we learned already in the past, you don't say Mizma L'Saida. Why? Because the Thanksgiving offering in the Beis Hamikdash was a private sacrifice. It wasn't communal. A private individual brought it. And the din is, private korbanos do not desecrate Shabbos. Private sacrifices don't desecrate Shabbos. So therefore, because the Korban Todah is a private korban, it wasn't brought on Shabbos. Therefore, we don't say it on Shabbos either, because it's corresponding with the Korban Todah. Another time we don't say it is during Pesach. Why not during Pesach? Because part of the Korban Todah was 10 loaves of bread that were chametz. Now obviously you're not allowed to bring chametz on Pesach, so a person couldn't bring the Korban Todah on Pesach. You can't bring the Korban Todah, so we don't say Mizma L'Saida. The same thing works Erev Pesach, even though you'd be able to eat the Korban Pesach the Korban Todah until you can eat chametz, but the Torah locks you a day and a night, so you have to be able to eat it. Therefore, every Yom Kippur we don't say it, because the night of Yom Kippur you wouldn't be able to eat it either. But all the other days of the year, we say Mizma L'Saida. What happens? A guy comes late to shul. Never happens. People are always in the first 10. Like we learned the other day, the first 10 gets the reward of all of them. So what happens now? According to the halacha, you're supposed to skip parts of davening to be able to daven Shmoneh Esrei with the minyan, the Amidah with the minyan. By the way, there's an interesting argument in halacha. What happens if somebody, now normally davening with a minyan means you daven Shmoneh Esrei, the Amidah, when everybody else davens Shmoneh Esrei. What happens if you daven your Shmoneh Esrei when the Chazan is repeating the Amidah? Is that also called Tefillah B'tzibur? So it's a big machlekes in that poskim. Some poskim say it is called Tefillah B'tzibur. There's a Ramay Shetshuva, there's a Chasam Sefer, there's a Buchacher. Some people say it is called Tefillah B'tzibur. Some people say it's not called Tefillah B'tzibur. Therefore, the best thing is to make sure you daven with the minyan. Now, according to Kabbalah, you don't skip davening, because davening goes in a certain seder. So according to Kabbalah, if God forbid once a year you came late to shul, so then you daven at your own pace, and then you just daven Shmoneh Esrei when you daven. Okay, okay, that's all about skip.
If Rabbi, the Chazan hasn't started with repetition yet,
Yeah.
and you've already started, is that considered being part of the minyan? He hasn't started yet?
It's questionable. Officially, according to many opinions, Tefillah B'tzibur is when you start the Shmoneh Esrei with everybody else. Okay? Now, what happens very often, like in Chabad houses and things like that, which is, again, an issue questionable in halacha. What happens, in other words, like this, you need 6 people to daven Shmoneh Esrei, right? Right? You must have 6 people in order to be counted Tefillah B'tzibur. Which is, by the way, the Alter Rebbe holds 6 people davening Shmoneh Esrei is Tefillah B'tzibur. Other poskim don't agree with that. But the Alter Rebbe holds, and the Rebbe brings down, the Alter Rebbe says clearly that 6 people davening the Shmoneh Esrei, the Amidah with the minyan is called Tefillah B'tzibur. Now, what happens if I have, let's say, 5 people davening at the beginning, and then the guy in the middle, like 3 minutes into Amidah, also starts davening the Amidah. Is he counted as number 6? So then, when you need to be mekel, you could be mekel. There are poskim that say you could be mekel. That then it's also part of the 6. You can count him as one of the 6, and then you could repeat the Shmoneh Esrei.
So 10 people.
only 6 of them actually davening.
To make what's called tefillah b'tzibur, for the chazan to be able to repeat the Shemona Esrei, you need 6 people davening and 9 people answering. That means 9 people are answering Amen. Which means if they're in the middle of davening where they can't talk, according to most opinions, you can't count them as one of the 9 people. Okay? Now what happens, by the way, which is a common question, somebody just asked me this the other day also, there's a very common question. I have 9 people davening. Now that's it. We don't have a minyan. We have 9 people. And 6 people daven the Shemona Esrei together. All 9 daven Shemona Esrei together. And then the 10th guy rolls into shul. Huh? It happens like at 12:30 Shachris minyan before you daven mincha. It could happen. Yeah. So then the question is now can you repeat the Shemona Esrei? There's an Imre Yosef that the poskim say that you could do it. Why? It's very simple. You have all the criterias that you need for the repetition. What do you need criteria for the repetition? 6 people davened, 10 people in the room, and 9 people answering Amen to the Chazan's repetition. So you have all these criterias are met. You have 6 people davening, you have 10 people in the room, 9 people are going to answer the Chazan, so you're allowed to do it.
What is the repetition for if already if 6 people are already davening?
And if 20 people daven, why do you do the repetition?
The repetition is for people who don't know how to daven, right?
And if everybody in the shul are holy tzaddikim, you have a million of tzaddikim, and they all know how to daven, why do you repeat the Shemona Esrei?
Exactly, that's
A good question. It's a very good question. And why don't you repeat Shabbat, at night, Ma'ariv? It's another good question. There's so many good questions we have. The purpose of Chazar Sashat's repetition of Shemona Esrei years ago was, like you said, a lot of people didn't know how to daven. Don't forget, they didn't have printed Siddurim. So you needed, first of all, even if they had, a lot of Jews were very ignorant. They couldn't read the Hebrew. They couldn't read. A lot of times, they didn't have Siddurim, so you're talking about davening by heart. Not everybody knows the davening by heart. So the repetition of the Chazan was for those people that didn't daven and can't daven, so they listened to the Chazan word by word, and by answering Amen, and this is considered as if they daven with the minyan. Okay, because they're listening. Shomer Kain, the listener is like saying it. So then it became the tradition that even if everybody knows how to daven, you still repeat the Shemona Esrei, because that was the Takonis Chazal. That's the institution that Chachamim made years ago, right? That you repeat the Shemona Esrei. Therefore, it's so important that 9 people answer Amen, because anyway, you take saying a bracha in vain. So the Chazan, the Alter Rebbe Korvli is, if you don't have 9 people answering Amen when the Chazan repeats the Shemona Esrei, the Alter Rebbe uses the expression, it's close to a blessing in vain. It's the Torah's second one of the 10 Commandments. Don't mention Hashem's name in vain. It's pretty powerful. So therefore, the Chazan repeats, says Am Shebesodis, the people in the fields, even if they don't hear it, the Chazan repeats it. Why don't we repeat Ma'ariv? It's very simple. We learned because Ma'ariv was optional. Nowadays, Jews accepted it upon themselves as an obligatory tefillah. But in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, is Machlekes Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, if it's mandatory or not. And then Gamliel held it was optional, and that's how he paskined on the halacha. So then, because it's optional anyway, why do you have to repeat it? Even if the guys didn't daven, it's optional anyway. So that's why we don't repeat Ma'ariv. And that's why, by the way, the Chazan doesn't repeat Elokai Netzor. Elokai Netzor is it's all part of the Amidah, right? Why doesn't the Chazan say Elokai Netzor? Because Elokai Netzor was not part of the original Shemona Esrei. The original Shemona Esrei made by Anshe Knesset Hagdolah at the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash, at only 18, and then the 19th Bracha V'Lam Mashinim came later. Elokai Netzor, was added in the time of the Gemara. It's not, therefore you can answer certain things in Elokai Netzor that you can't answer in the regular Shemona Esrei. So it's like an additional part added later. So it's not from the vital parts of Shemona Esrei, so therefore we don't. What?
Shacharis was originated by
by Abraham, right?
Yeah.
Mincha by
Yitzchak. Married by Yaakov.
So if it was originated by Yaakov, how is it Baal Shemerit?
First of all, they were the ones that No. You understand what you're saying? You're saying a very good point. In fact, Taisus in Shabbos says that even though the Gemara says Mariv is optional, Taisus says, nevertheless, nowadays, everybody accepted it upon themselves an obligation. And, Taisus says, and Yaakov Avinu made it. So how can you not daven? But they instituted it, but not as a mandatory thing. In other words, like this. Shachris corresponds with the communal sacrifice they brought every morning. That they brought the half a shekel, everybody had okay. Mincha represents the afternoon carbon tubit. Okay? So then, so davening now is instead of the sacrifices. Okay, so Shachris was mandatory sacrifice in the morning. Mincha was the afternoon mandatory sacrifice, so you have Mincha. Ma'ariv the din was like this. If they didn't have the chance, let's see, the Mizbeach was a busy day. So what did they do with the leftover meat and limbs that they couldn't burn during the day? Because korbanos were only allowed to be brought during the day. So the korban was brought during the day. If they had leftover meat and limbs and all that, they burnt it throughout the night. So that's where Ma'ariv comes in. But that wasn't the mandatory korban. But Yaakov instituted Shachris. Yaakov, but the obligation of Mincha Ma'ariv came later. What?
So we have 6 guys davening and 5 to answer. So 11. And one of the 6 right after Shemona Esrei he leaves. So you still have 10, but it's still the Chazar Sashatz.
It's not so simple. It's very questionable on halacha. What?
Then they without repetition, some people just say what do you call it?
Tachtum?
No, they say the first, they read the whole thing and then they just daven the rest. Without repetition. Or like some shuls, they just go straight.
Oh, you mean they start the first 3 and they say Kedusha? That's called laziness.